New Aberdeen is the northernmost metropolitan city in the continental United States, located just under the main Canadian border. Originally established in 1799 as a Scottish colony, it wound up growing exponentially as the United States of America came into its own as a nation. Even before the 1950 quarantine, the city's remote location meant it was relatively isolated from the rest of the country, and thus it was predominantly self-sufficient. This distance prevented New Aberdenians from participating in the War of 1812, and due to the destruction of the railroad system by Confederate sympathizers, few citizens were able to fight in the American Civil War. Advancements in both automotive and aeronautical transportation would help bring New Aberdeen into the world at large, but the denizens continued keeping to themselves mostly out of habit. The terrain also plays a role in the city's isolation. A small mountain range borders New Aberdeen to the north. The expansive Lake Orr forms a border to the east, and dense, untamed forests surround it to the west and south. It was often said by outsiders that the only reason anyone travels to New Aberdeen is to stay there, since it is so out of the way. Of course, thanks to the quarantine, this exaggeration may be a terrible reality. Despite official word that the city was completely evacuated in 1950, conspiracy theorists claim that distress signals are occasionally broadcast from within the Q zone, but the authenticity of this evidence is disputed. The following episode of the Victor Jones Radio Hour appears to have been broadcast the week following the previous episode. Due to improper filing and a lack of labeling, the exact broadcast dates of the episodes are unknown. This may become an issue as we progress through the series. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Victor Jones Radio Hour, brought to you by Oyster Brand Toothpaste. Confucius' lost pearl of wisdom was to brush with Oyster Brand. As always, I'm Victor Jones. Thanks a million for tuning in. I'm pleased to say that I can make good on my promise, folks. Captain Joseph Blythe is in the studio at this very moment. Say hello to the lovely folks at home, Captain, so they don't think I'm making things up.
Hello, everyone.
That's right, folks. Victor Jones always keeps his promises, even when they're incredibly vague and come with caveats. That's why mine is the #1 news program in this wonderful city of ours. We'll be speaking to him in a moment, but first, a look at the week in review. The presence of the masked man has officially escalated as of Thursday night. The disturbance at the Feldberg Company's factory on Union Street is apparently his doing, if word on the street is to be believed. Rumors have long held that the Feldberg Company is a front for the Migliore family smuggling operations. The 3 confirmed fatalities from the incident were indeed identified as known smugglers, as were the 15 survivors who were taken into custody by the NAPD once their identities were confirmed. No official connection to the Migliore family has been established at the moment, and details on the nature of the contraband have not been released to the public as yet. That the mysterious masked figure is involved has not been confirmed by the police, but eyewitnesses place him unambiguously at the scene. Eyewitnesses also noted the single-word enigma found spelled in bullet holes on the factory's front wall. Many believe this to be the name of the mystery man, and whether it is or not, it seems to be sticking. I recall referring to this fellow as enigmatic when I first reported on him, and while I'm far too humble to take full credit for naming him, I will take some. Either way, I'm sure we're all looking forward to seeing what the Enigma will do next, and whether he will be a boon for the city or a menace to it. No rational explanation for the strange activity in Lake Orr has been presented as yet, but one which some are calling irrational may have literally reared its head. The Sunday edition of New Aberdeen Daily ran a story about the sighting of a large unidentified creature seen swimming in the water. The creature, whatever it is, was described as looking prehistoric in nature, similar to either a plesiosaurus or an alligator, though not enough of it was above the surface to allow for easy identification or size estimation. Although there are alleged to be multiple eyewitnesses, only one has stepped forward as of this point. Representatives from Cobalt Labs naturally scoffed at the idea of a living dinosaur in the lake, saying they will need more evidence before considering it as a possible explanation for the aquatic anomalies. The eyewitness wished to remain anonymous, citing fear of public ridicule for the nature of his sighting. It's possible he also wished to avoid a different kind of ridicule, seeing as how the sighting occurred at the Golden Skies Nudist Resort, which is located on the shores of Lake Orr. There are 1,000 different jokes I could make from just that fact alone, but all of them would get me pulled off the air faster than you can say Jack Robinson. So instead, I will simply say we'll wait to see if any hard evidence of this alleged long serpent is revealed in public. A potential lead in the strange disappearances on Farrell Avenue has surfaced. It has come to the attention of the NAPD that people wearing jumpsuits emblazoned with the Cobalt Labs insignia have been seen with great abundance in the area since the disappearances began. This may not seem like much of a revelation at first. Cobalt technicians are a common sight in our fair city, as it is their expertise which keeps our engines running, literally and proverbially. However, investigator observations and eyewitness testimonies confirm that the presence of these individuals on the Devil's Lane is greater than anywhere else in New Aberdeen. The reps at Cobalt Labs issued a denial of any sinister activity, but all requests for interviews have been denied. The NAPD is still compiling evidence to justify a search warrant. It appears my guest has gone to see a man about a horse, so now is as good a time as any for a brief musical number. How about a nice classical ditty recently popularized by the New Aberdeen Light Orchestra? How can you not love the classics? If you're just tuning in, you're listening to the Victor Jones Radio Hour, presented by Oyster Brand Toothpaste. If you're embarrassed to show your winning smile, don't be shellfish. Brush with Oyster Brand Toothpaste for all the confidence you'll ever need. I don't write these slogans, folks. I just get paid to read them. Now on with the show. He became a hero when he left to fight in the war. Then he became a legend when he vanished without a trace mere weeks before the armistice. Now it's time to kill the fatted calf, for New Aberdeen's prodigal son has finally returned home, and he's with me in the studio tonight. It's none other than Captain Joseph Blythe. On behalf of my audience and crew, I'd like to welcome you back, Captain Blythe.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. And no need to be so formal. I haven't been a captain for years. Joseph or Joe will do, please.
If you say so. Since we're being informal, Victor or Vic will do for me. Before we get too far into this, do you need a glass of water? Your throat sounds awfully dry.
This is just how my voice sounds these days. In the trenches I was stationed in, the mustard gas was thicker than water, and even the best gas mask has its limits.
That's too bad to hear, but I suppose a scratchy throat is a fair trade for surviving the most brutal war in human history. How on earth did you do it? Survive, I mean.
It's a mixture of finding patterns in the enemy's behavior and good old-fashioned luck. The patterns are what help you to maneuver, knowing what time of day they fire or where they place their mines, and the luck is what keeps you alive long enough to figure out those patterns. It's a good thing Germany produces soldiers every bit as precise and efficient as its clocks, because that made finding those patterns even easier. After that, it's just a matter of combining your training with improvisation.
Yes, your exploits have become the stuff of legend here. Admittedly, though, most of that information came to us after the war ended.
So I heard from Hope, Miss G. I understand there's even a book about me?
A book called Soldier of Fortune by Gil Baxter, the rights to which Warner Brothers and Paramount are currently fighting their own war over. A bidding war, that is.
I'll have to read it at some point. I'm very curious to know just how much he got right, and how much of my work has been declassified.
Speaking of declassified, people all across the city are just dying to know where you've been all this time. 13 years is a long while for anyone to fall off the face of the earth. Even the article in the paper didn't mention a thing about the gap.
Well, Hope did. Miss G asked me the same thing, and I did tell her, but I'm not surprised it was cut from the paper. It's the kind of story that's hard to believe unless you went through it like I did. In fact, Even I sometimes wonder how much of it was a dream and how much was real. All I can do is tell you what I remember.
Oh, is it now? Did you perhaps wind up in Shangri-La?
Not quite, but that's a very good guess. I don't know if it's really worth telling if the papers dropped it.
Please, Joe, enlighten us. Why else would I put you on the air if not to speak of your exploits? And besides, it'll drive Hope crazy knowing I got the story she had to cut.
If you say so. I don't remember the exact day it happened. Spend enough time in the trenches and it all starts to blend together. I just know that I was in the Argonne when I got separated from the group.
You were part of the Lost Battalion?
Not officially. I was there for... well, again, I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to say at this point. It was a gray morning, and the fog was already thick, but a recent gas attack had made the visibility even worse. The forecast was just one big cloud. I was part of a small platoon sent to scout the perimeter, check for supply drops, and maybe see if there was any way for at least some of us to get out of that hellhole. I went ahead of the others, and an explosion went off behind me. I don't know if it was a bomb or a mine, but whatever it was, it knocked me hard on my...
As respectful as I am of how different things are in the military, Joe, I'd like to remind you there are certain words you can't say on the radio.
I was going to say face.
Ah, my apologies. Continue.
Well, I was stunned for a minute before my senses came back to me. Once I was back on my feet, I tried locating the others, but that's when things took a turn for the weird. Even through the haze, nothing about the terrain looked right to me. I couldn't see any recognizable landmarks, no crater where the blast had gone off, and the cherry on top was that I'd fallen on top of my compass and smashed it to bits.
Sounds dire.
It was. The only trick I had left was to check the moss on the trees, since moss only grows on the north side. Once I did that, I thought I'd oriented myself, and I started heading southwest. At least I thought I was heading southwest. I must have been, because... sorry, but this part of the story is just so frustrating because not everything adds up.
Ours is not to judge, only to listen. How long did it take before you realized you were lost?
That's one of the things that doesn't add up. I just kept walking and walking. I couldn't see the sky or even 5 feet ahead of me. I'm sure I was headed in the right direction, though. The fact is, I should have either reached a base camp or run into the enemy at some point, but I never did. I just kept walking until I found... the cave.
Something tells me this is where it gets really strange.
You have no idea. I don't remember ever seeing a cave like this on any map of the Argonne, but there it was, plain as day. I was tired after walking for so long, so I went inside to rest, and then I fell asleep, not sure for how long, and when I woke up, I heard voices from deeper in the cave.
Voices? What were they saying?
I couldn't make out any distinct words, but I know a voice when I hear one. I thought about just leaving and trying to find base camp again, but I realized that if whoever else was in there was lost or hurt, I'd never be able to forgive myself if I didn't at least try to help. Besides, the fog still hadn't lifted outside. So I struck a match and plunged into the void, following the sound. Eventually... God, my head.
What's the matter? You all right, Joe? You look a little pale.
Sorry. Remembering anything from the war is hard for me sometimes. I think I'd like that glass of water you offered me earlier, please.
Sure thing, Joe. Actually, this seems like a natural place to pause and play some mood music. Perhaps something to ease the troubled mind. Welcome back, folks. You're listening to the Victor Jones Radio Hour, brought to you by Oyster Brand Toothpaste. I'm in the studio with Captain Joseph Blythe, war hero and man of mystery. At the moment, though, his memories of what he did after the war seem to be giving him a bit of shell shock. You okay to keep going, Joe? Or do you want to take a rain check on finishing your story?
Yes, I think I'm alright. Sorry for the scare.
I understand war can have that effect on people. Anyway, if you're good to go, I believe you were following voices in a cave when you left off.
Right. So I followed the voices deeper into the cave. It was strange, they always sounded like they were right in front of me, but I couldn't reach them. After a while, I'm not sure how long really, I dropped my last spent match and realized I could see fine without it. There was light coming from ahead of me, and when I went towards it, I wound up in a city.
A city? In a cave?
I told you at the start it was hard to believe. And it wasn't an ancient ruin either. This was a living, breathing city. Kind of similar to New Aberdeen, now that I think of it.
And there were, people in this city?
Yes, among other things. That's where I stayed for the past few years, since their doctors said I had wounds which needed tending.
Uh-huh.
I can tell you think I'm nuts.
Sorry, I mean no disrespect. Well, I don't know where I was expecting this story to go, but it wasn't in this direction.
Like I said, Victor, all I can tell you is what I remember, and I remember being in an underground city. I certainly had no clue I was down there for 13 years, though.
Well, having been there for so long, you must know quite a bit about it.
Only a little, since I never quite mastered the language, and not every word has an English equivalent. I don't know very much about the history, but from what I understand, it's been there for a long time. Most of the people who live there are human, but also more than human. And there are other things down there, the likes of which I've never seen before. They're slightly ahead of us, technology-wise, but only by a few years, if I had to guess.
And pardon me for asking, but do you have, proof that this city exists?
If you want proof, maybe time is all we'll need. The council of this city was very interested in New Aberdeen when I told them about it, and they want to send an ambassador here.
So, the proof will be if and when this subterranean ambassador arrives.
I suppose so, and if he never shows, then maybe it really was all a dream. Then again, if that's so, it still leaves the question of where I was for all that time. For what it's worth, Hope G believes my story, though she hasn't told me why yet.
Well, she always was a sucker for veterans. If you don't mind a change of subject to something more mundane, Joe, I'm sure people are dying to know what you intend to do now that you've returned home.
Well, I don't really know, Victor. What can a man who spent most of his life fighting do when there aren't any wars to win?
He could always find a new outlet for his skills. Maybe you can join the police. You could be a real boon for the city. You know, New Aberdeen may not have been hit as hard as every other city by the crash, but we're still feeling the effects.
Oh, good heavens, no. Nothing against the department, but the way I dispense justice would never fly with them. I'm sure something will present itself someday. Maybe something new.
Something new, huh? Thinking maybe of following in the footsteps of the Enigma? Or maybe you actually are him?
I can assure you, Victor, I am not the Enigma.
And as far as the part about following in his footsteps?
Like I said, Victor, I'm sure something will present itself. Let's leave it at that.
Playing it coy, huh? I like it. Well, on behalf of my crew, I'd like to thank you for joining us in the studio tonight.
You're welcome. But what crew?
My crew, the boys here who help me run the show.
Are you talking about people on another floor, or...
No, they're in here with us.
You and I are the only ones in the room, Victor.
The gas must have gotten your eyes too, I suppose.
My eyes are fine.
Time for one last musical interlude, folks. How about something with a beat? Almost time to call it a night, folks. My guest has already excused himself to call a cab home, and he leaves us with more questions than answers regarding his whereabouts after the Great War. I don't know what to believe, folks. His story sounds nuttier than a tree full of squirrels, but the sincerity in his voice was matched only by the sincerity in his eyes. I'd certainly like to believe him, but the rational part of my brain is telling me not to. I suppose it all depends on the arrival of that ambassador he alluded to. If anyone in that alleged subterranean city can hear this broadcast, I hope you don't keep us waiting too long. Thanks for tuning in to the Victor Jones Radio Hour, brought to you by Oyster Brand Toothpaste. On behalf of my loyal crew, I'm Victor Jones. Take care of yourselves, and I'll be back next week. The New Aberdeen Tapes, Episode 2, Captain Joseph Blythe's Interview. Written, directed, and edited by Ryan Collins. Title card by Snazzy Chapeau. Featuring The Second Opinion as Captain Joseph Blythe. Ryan Collins as Victor Jones and narrator. Featuring the following music, available through YouTube's Creator Studios and Creative Commons. 1940s Slow Dance by Doug Maxwell. The 1812 Overture by Pyotr Ilyevich Tchaikovsky. Minyo-san Kyoku by Doug Maxwell and Zach Zinger. Chances by Silent Partner. Thank you for listening. Be sure to tune in for the next episode.